Hi guys, welcome to the last section, Awesome Tasks with Ember. Now, we move on to the first video of this section that deals with using Ember validations. Data form validation is a very common use case in web development. The end user will know immediately if they've made a mistake when you create validation rules in your application. In this video, we'll take a look at two examples on validation. In the first example, we'll use a component and check data based on a few simple validation rules. In the second example, we'll use a popular Ember add-on to make things easier. First, we will create a new application. So, the application is created. Now, we will move to validations. In a new application, we will create two components and install the validation add-on. For that, we will type in ember.g-component-val-example command. Next, we will type ember.g-component-val-example2 command. For installing the validation add-on, we will type ember install CP validation. The val example component will be the first example. The val example2 component will be the second example using the Ember CP Validations add-on. The next step is to update the val example.hbs component template file. For that, we will open the val example.hbs file. We will add these lines of code here. This component asks for an age. If the button is clicked, the check action will be triggered. A simple input helper is used to capture the input. The error property displays the error text. We will then open the val example.js component file. Here, we will add a check action and simple validation method. The check action calls the validation method. The validation method's only purpose is to return true if the value is a number and return false if the value is not. The result is used to set the error property that will be used in the template. This is a fairly simple example. It shows what you might need to validate the field. Another example might be creating a new computed property and have it depend on the num property. Either way will work. Now, let's save the files. Next, we will open the application.hbs file. We will add the component to the application.hbs template file. The val example component will render at val example. Let's save the file. Now, we will run Ember server using ember serve command. Now, let's navigate to the web page and refresh the page. Here, we will enter a non-numeric value in the text box. It will give an error message. The error in box message is displayed because a number was not entered. This was triggered after the check button was clicked. For the next example, we will use an Ember add-on instead. The next step is to update the val example2.hbs template file so that it can accept an email and number. For that, we will open the val example.hbs file. We will add these lines of code here. This second component is a little more complicated than the first. We'll be validating two form fields, a number field and email field. In addition, we'll be surrounding the message in a div tag that will be used to help set color of the text. Both fields will be validated after pressing the check button. Let's save it. Now, we will create a new validations.js file in the components folder. Here, we will add a few lines of code snippet. This file is needed for the Ember CP Validations add-on. In this file, we define our validation rules. We begin by naming each property and defining the validations needed. We validate many different types of inputs. A list of these validations can be found at this website. The validator add-on comes with several pre-built messages. We overwrite these messages by setting the message property. In this code, the num and email validators have custom messages. The num validator checks to see whether any value is in the field and whether it's a number. The email field checks to see whether the value is in the format of an email address. We will now add a new check action to the component. For that, we open the val example2.js file. We will add this code snippet in the valexample.js file. First, we will replace import line with these two lines. After setting up the validations file, you can add it to the component as a mixin. After adding the validations mixin, you'll have access to the validate method. This is a promise that returns after it validates the fields. The validations have an isValid property. This will only return true if both properties, num and email, passed validation. We also check each individual validation as well. We can access the model properties in the component. This model will have both the num and email properties. We use validations.attrs.num.isInvalid to check whether the validation failed. If it did, we can set message we created earlier with validations.attrs.num.messages. In this code, if the validation is not valid, then we set the error message that will be displayed in the template after the check action is triggered. This add-on is very flexible. We create our own custom validations if needed. Now, we will update the application.hbs file with the second component. This will display the second component example in our application template. Here, we have to add to and save it. We will not change the import line of code in the valexample2.js file. Let's run the Ember server using the ember serve command. There will be some warning error, which are absolutely fine. We will navigate to the web browser and refresh the web page. Here, we will enter invalid values for age and email and click on the check button. After clicking on the check button, an action is triggered. The validators we created earlier check the text and return whether the text is valid or not. In this instance, the text is not valid, so it displays an error message. Data form validation is an extremely important feature of any web app. Any Ember application that has any type of user forms will need to validate data. Ember.js can retrieve data from templates and validate it. Other properties can be used to toggle or set error messages to be displayed.